helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at OshkoshMedia.com.
If you could all please take your seats so we can reconvene and begin reviewing the budget amendments. I know there are a number of additional amendments being worked on. I believe it's 3 or 4 more beyond the 4 that you already have. But I think we can get started with the ones that we have currently. So if you could all just take your seat, please press your attend buttons. All right, very good. So starting, and just so we're all clear, what we would plan on doing is take up the amendments in succession. There are 4 currently, but like I said, I believe they're working on 3 or 4 other ones and finalizing the paperwork. We'll go through 1 through 7 or 8 in succession. Once we're done with voting up and down all those amendments, then we'll move to a vote to the final budget approval as amended, okay? So we'll start with the first amendment, and that's resolution number 233-102019. Add $206,722 to the budget of Facilities, Department of Human Services, and District Attorney's Office collectively for the purpose of establishing / continuing the diversion program, implementing 2 project position case managers from the Department of Human Services, and relocating the Office of Corporation Counsel. I will call on Supervisor Defferting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to pass resolution number 233-102019.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Second. There's a motion and a second. We'll open it up for discussion. I see a number of lights. Supervisor Defferting, did you want to say something first, or? Yes. Okay, please go ahead, and then we'll move.
We've already kind of we had a wonderful spirited debate on this this morning. I'm glad we had it. The district attorney did make 2 presentations in front of the county board, and also spoke at the Judicial and Public Safety Committee earlier this year about this. And it sounds like everyone is on board to making a change. And this is the time to start making a change, and it starts here at the county level first and foremost. We can't simply wait for the state to do something. We have to take action ourselves here. I understand the concerns in regards to Corporation Counsel and her ability to do her job as well. I think that we can find a way to resolve those issues, not just on the 3rd floor, but also, again, we could probably work in some sort of shared space thing on the 1st floor as well. I think that I understand the needs of having an efficient corporation counsel, but we also have to realize that this is, in the terms of criminal justice, this is affecting directly our people who we represent. And these are our constituents. These are the people that we answer to. So we, at the end of the day, we have to ask the question, what's best for the county? What's more cost effective for the county, and what's a way for us to lower our recidivism rate, as well as lower our arrest rate at the end of the day too? What example can we set? And I think that we're at the tipping point right now where we could set a wonderful example for the rest of the state. And, I think that this is the best path, the most cost-effective path to take. Out of all the options that have been given, we do not have to build a new building. This is actually, compared to a lot of other options there, incredibly less expensive. So I urge the rest of the board to vote yes on this amendment.
Thank you, Supervisor Defferting. I'll call first on Supervisor Gordon, followed by Supervisor Albrecht.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am in agreement with this budget amendment. However, I would like to strike on line 26 and 27 the additionally about the Office of Corporation Counsel. I believe we can achieve this with some imaginative work in other parts of the building without dislocating Corporation Counsel from the 1st floor.
Okay, so just to clarify, is that an amendment you're making? That's what it sounds like.
Yes, I'm moving to strike additionally through Corporation Counsel.
Okay. So, just to be clear, we're striking the verbiage on line 26. Additionally, a very small remodel of existing space would need to be done to relocate the office of Corporation Counsel. And I assume in the amendment title, you would also be removing and relocating the office of Corporation Counsel.
Correct.
Please?
We have building improvements on here of $7,100 that was going to be for the remodel. So then I would suggest that we would get rid of the $7,100 as well.
I don't,
No, okay.
So-
No,
so-
It
so-
was- That's what it's part for, though. That's, I mean, when I put it in there, I just want to let you
well,
know.
my point was, we could reimagine other space. So, yes.
Okay, right. So the amendment is a verbiage change, and that's line 26. Again, to remove additionally, a very small remodel of existing space would need to be done to relocate the office of Corporation Counsel, and to remove the verbiage and relocating the office of Corporation Counsel in the amendment title. Okay, so that's the amendment. There was a motion and a second. Who was the second, just to verify? Okay, so now, we have a lot of lights on the board, okay? So, but now, there was a motion second, so that amendment takes precedent. So now we will be debating the amendment verbiage removal only, then we will come back to the original amendment, okay? So, starting with the next individual, that's Supervisor Albrecht, specifically on the amendment.
Okay, after the word implementation, I would like to add, and there's $7,100 is to be deleted, avoiding displacement of an established department office of Corporation Counsel's office, space that is critical for its operation when other space is not being used and is available. I would like to add those words after implementation.
Okay, so I think what we need to do is we need to finalize this amendment first in terms of removing this verbiage. And then we would come back afterward for you to make amendment to add that. Am I correct on that?
It's all part of the same thing, but yes, you can do it your way.
Okay. Okay, is everyone clear on that? Okay, so we're still on the amendment to remove the verbiage first, okay? So next speaker is Supervisor Wojciechowski, followed by Supervisor Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Julie kind of beat me to it. Yes, I agree with the resolution. I signed on to it. But after talking with some fellow supervisors, Dr. Topol, Corporation Counsel, I would like to see this happen, but not at the expense of, losing efficiency and making Corporation Counsel have to move. Talking to Dr. Topol, we basically what he said and what others have kind of alluded to is that the basement of Orrin King building would be sufficient. I think it's a good location. I think it's a good compromise. If we use that location, yes, it'd have to be remodeled to an extent, but it doesn't sound like it would have to be remodeled. The cost would not be tremendous. And I think because, we're talking about this sort of starting off as a pilot project, we don't expect it to be a huge project right off in the beginning. I think it's a good location to kind of start it off, and if we do need to increase space, we can look at that at a later date. But I think, I don't want to have to move Corporation Counsel for this, but I do want to see this program initiated. So I do support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wojciechowski. Next speaker, Supervisor Ellis, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Chairman. Mine was on the same premise as this too, not to move the corporate counsel, but on a pilot run, just like a pilot run, there should be a different location than to move the corporate counsel.
Thank you, Supervisor Ellis. Next speaker, Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Norton.
I agree with the amendment, and I have an additional amendment of the amendment in respect to the expense for building improvements, which I will offer at the proper time.
Correct. We'll finish this amendment, and I'm actually going to give Supervisor Albrecht an opportunity, because he could have technically amended, and I asked that we finished up with his amendment. So we'll give him an opportunity once we're finalize the vote on this amendment. Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker, Supervisor Norton, followed by Supervisor Rasmussen.
So I think you answered my question I was going to ask, is Supervisor Albrecht's wordage or amendment included in this amendment, and you said no,
It's
correct?
not in it. When we finalize this vote, and I'm going to give an opportunity
And
for him to do
just say
that.
my piece, I support that, because I think what he's trying to do is making sure that space is available, and that's up to the county executive to figure out, but no way will that affect the corporation council, and I'll be quiet now, okay?
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next speaker is Supervisor Rasmussen, followed by Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with this amendment. It's a slippery slope if this board is going to start moving departments around. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. Next speaker, Supervisor Fari, followed by Supervisor Wingren.
Thank you. I'll support the amendment. Obviously, I supported the amendment in writing, by putting my name on it. However, if we take this action and amend this, then we're going to have to get a number to address the building improvements, specifically if you're looking at the basement. It's going to be substantially higher. So if we can get Mr. Elder back here or somebody to give us an estimated cost, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker is Supervisor Wingren, followed by Supervisor Gabbard.
Thank you. Vicki, this is a clarification. Did you suggest we take out the money that was for building improvement, $7,100? I disagree, because there might be some, like there's 2 temporary walls on the 3rd floor. They're not supporting walls, but they might need to be taken down.
Right.
And that would cost $3,000, I found out as of yesterday. So I would suggest leave it there and either use it or put it back if we don't use it.
And to clarify, I got that 7,100 from Mike Elder, and it was,
Yeah.
to the best of my knowledge, to take out those walls. But either way, I was confused by
Yeah, well, I mean,
Supervisor Gordon's
So that's why I'm asking
request.
what this is.
Yeah,
Yep.
it was
It's
from
there,
my,
it stays in there.
yeah,
Correct.
All right.
right, yes.
We don't
Yes.
have to spend it. I also just, editorial, I agree with the idea, we can't nitpick this thing to death and micromanage. Let the county executive make this work. That's what he's getting paid for, the big, big bucks.
Thank you, Supervisor Wingren. And just to reiterate your clarification, this is only based on the wording change in line 2627 and in the title. It changes none of the numbers currently, the amendment that we're discussing right now. Next speaker, Supervisor Gabbard, followed by Supervisor Defferty.
This is on taking the verbiage out for relocating the Office of Corporate Counsel. I do not feel that she needs to be moved, and listening to Dr. Topol, he is okay with the basement at the Oren King building, as I am. I think we can make this work. It's a pilot program, but I think the main concern for me is we need to get this program in the works, because I think this will help take care of people in Winnebago County. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gabbard. Next speaker, Supervisor Defferty, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that it's just very crucial that we, at the very least, keep it at the Oren King building. That's how these diversion programs will be effective. Because if we put it in another building, that's going to be the kiss of death. We're going to start losing diversion candidates. They're not going to be connected to the services that they need, and we'll start losing people. It's going to increase our likeliness of failure again for the second time. So if we decide not to have it on the first floor and put it in the basement, I just have to reiterate, this has to stay in the Oren King building. It's just the most cost-effective option. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Defferty. Next speaker, Supervisor Eisen.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask for a recorded vote.
We will certainly do so. Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Okay, so seeing no other call-ins, we're going to go to a recorded vote. This is specifically on the amendment to remove verbiage only in the title, and relocating the Office of Corporation Counsel would be removed. And then in lines 26 and 27, removing additionally a very small remodel of existing space would need to be done to relocate the Office of Corporation Counsel. That would also be removed. That's all that we're voting on currently. Vote aye if you recommend approval, vote no if you don't.
We're voting to remove that verbiage.
Remove that verbiage, correct. Okay.
ahead. You can vote now. You were marked. It's not working. Yes, you weren't marked present. Now you can vote.
And if we could remove Supervisor Lautenschläger, given he's not present.
Okay. It's everybody else?
And that motion carries 29-1. So now we are on the main motion as amended. As I said, I was going to give Supervisor Albrecht an opportunity. Please, Supervisor Albrecht.
On line 26, after the word implementation, I would like to say that avoiding displacement of an established department, office of Corporation Counsel's office, space that is critical for the operation when other space is not being used and is available. That's the amendment I would like to add.
Okay. Did you capture all of that? So
I have it in writing for you here if you want it.
maybe if we can do that, yes. So, and then we'll. So we want to get the language correct. So
Chairman, I'd ask the clerk to read that back, please.
yes, absolutely. We'll definitely do that.
So the amendment is avoiding displacement of an established department, office of Corporation Counsel's office, space that is critical for its operation when other space is not being used and is available. So that would be amending amendment number 1, deleting the last sentence of the amendment, beginning with the word additionally. Certainly.
We're going to repeat it one more time.
Okay. Avoiding displacement of an established department, office of Corporation Counsel's office, space that is critical for its operation when other space is not being used and is available.
Can I speak on it for 1 second?
Please go right ahead.
Like, I've sat with her predecessor and along with the current corporation counsel, I've sat in that waiting room there when I was the only one waiting numerous times, and I also sat in there numerous times when there were three other people waiting, so it isn't just the big space that's going to waste. I mean, there are people that are waiting in line for her expertise.
Thank you, Supervisor Albrecht. Next speaker, Supervisor Konecki, specifically on the amendment.
Yes. Corporate counsel, will you live with this? If this passes?
Yes, I can live with it as long as we remain where we are, yes. Thank
I
you.
got it. I want to make sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Corporation Counsel, and thank you, Supervisor Konecki. I'll call on Supervisor Keller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just kind of wonder if these changes, these amendments to this resolution are actually going to mean anything. I just wonder if it is our board's responsibility to decide how departments are arranged within county buildings. I just wonder if the county executive even needs to follow that part of it. Yes, he needs to follow the budget and the money part of it, but I wonder if he needs to follow that we tell him where he's going to put each department that he is under his jurisdiction. Can the corporate counsel address that? An example of that is we did pass an amendment, I think a year ago, about a building that never happened because the county executive didn't have to do it. So that's my question.
Supervisor Keller, the statute is clear. The county executive shall be the chief executive officer of the county. Essentially, the county board holds the purse strings, and the county executive is the person in charge of deciding where things, how to basically operate the county. He shall administer, supervise, and direct all county departments. This amendment that came in was specifically talking about relocating the Office of Corporation Counsel. So certainly, while it is in the county executive's authority to do, I think the reason there were these amendments was because it was put in. And so to obviously correct that, the various amendment to correct the amendment was implemented. Does that answer your question?
Well, so my question is that the amendment that is before us right now, that specifically says avoiding displacement of the corporate council, is that under our jurisdiction? I understand taking out relocating the corporate council is not, then I would say this is also not.
Again, I think it is tied into what was initially suggested, but I do not want to take away the power of the county executive. But again, for clarification, given everything that has gone on, I think it is, I do not have a problem with that language being put in here.
It does benefit you.
Thank you, Supervisor Keller. Next speaker, Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Wojciechowski.
I oppose that amendment, and the reason I'm uncomfortable with that is I believe that that verbiage is unnecessary. It's unnecessary to establish this program for the district attorney to say it's going to don't impact the corporate council. That has no place in it. What I would prefer, which I have an amendment to offer, is addressing the amount of money for building improvements for this program. And with that, I have expressed my opposition or uncomfortableness with this amendment, and look forward to putting a dollar figure on the improvements for the basement of Oran King, with or without the presence of the facilities director.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker, Supervisor Wojciechowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my question, I think, kind of similar to Supervisor Keller and Eisen is this necessary? I think the way it is after the previous amendment, it does what we want it to do, and that is to not displace Corporation Council. And I don't think that the county exec would do that. I know he can't speak right now really on this, but you know, I think with our language that we added in the previous amendment, that's not going to happen. So I don't really see I mean, I guess Corporation Council maybe can clarify this, but is this necessary is this amendment necessary?
Thank you, Supervisor Wojciechowski. Corporation Council.
Looking at the language, I believe an argument could be made that it is redundant. The bottom line is that the Office of Corporation Counsel, as you folks have agreed, should not be relocated. And that was taken care of with the First Amendment. This Second Amendment clarifies the rationale for that vote, but if you don't want it, then so be it.
I'll call on Supervisor Binder.
I guess in my just common sense, why would we remodel two areas when we basically have corporate counsel where she is? So why would we want to move her somewhere else to remodel that for her and then remodel something else for the district attorney? She is where she has been, and that's where she should stay. And the district attorney, we have to remodel something for him to start this program. But as good stewards of the taxpayers' money, I think we should only do the remodeling for one, not remodeling two. It gets pretty expensive.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll go to a vote. We're going to do a recorded vote being consistent with the amendment of the last one. So vote aye if you want to approve adding the language, and I'll read it again. It's on line 26. Avoiding displacement of an established department, Office of Corporation Counsel's office, that is critical to its operation when other space is available and not being used. Okay? she's. And that motion passes 19-9. Okay, so now we are on the original amendment as amended twice, which basically essentially removed the verbiage from 26 and 27 after the additionally, and added the language we just voted on and supported. And the only other difference was changing the title, taking out the verbiage, and relocating Corporation Council. So that's where we are at currently. I'll call on Supervisor Shorsey. So we're back on the main motion as amended so far.
Yes, that's what I understand. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to amend the resolution to change, and I think it's, at least in one place it's mentioned, is on line 25, and change that to creating this center, comma, one project position case manager and one case manager / project coordinator from the Department of Human Services. And then in addition to that, increasing the amount to, let's say, $215,000 in the amendment to accommodate a little bit higher pay for that person who is a project coordinator. And I talked to Dr. Topol about this, and what you're seeing in terms of really lack of leadership between vision and in implementation is the absence of someone who takes the concept and actually puts wheels to it in terms of implementing. And then a second piece of that would be then this project coordinator would be required to produce detailed program plan and budgets that would go through the proper process with the board like we require for every other project we do.
Okay, so just to clarify the amendment, and I think there's one that's still going to need more clarification because there was some information about number changes, budget changes.
Yes.
So first though, on line 25, where it says creating this center, it would be changing the word two to one. Say one project position case manager. And then after that, you would add the verbiage and one case manager / project coordinator.
Yes.
And then continue with the verbiage. The other clarification, you were talking about some budgetary impact. and
Changing
numbers.
the number from $206,722 to like $215,000.
Okay, so
To
you change,
allow, it's not specific, but I don't think we can deal with that right now.
okay. So it'd be changing in the title, the number 206,722 to 215, and then it would be changing the regular pay, FICA, Medicare, health, dental, I'm assuming, the finance instructor would clarify, to equal between 206,722 and 215. That difference of 8,278. Please,
Yeah.
go ahead, finance
Do you have a
director.
better number?
First off, I'd like to ask the HR director or Bill Topol. These are two different positions, or the same grade? I mean, we actually grade these out to
Right,
find out what
right.
the wages is. Would that be exactly the same?
The coordinator would essentially be one grade level higher than the case manager because
I don't have those.
they would have some responsibilities for oversight.
I would need those numbers from the HR director for that, so and I don't know that he can get me those this quickly.
Right, that's why I suggested 215.
Okay, he'll have a few minutes, so we'll have to change the wages, FICA and everything, and see if that is your difference of $8,278. But at this point, I don't have it.
Yeah, yeah.
3 minutes.
Okay.
3 minutes, he said.
So currently, that is the motion, though, with those numbers.
Yes.
Was there a second? Second. There was a motion and a second, so that's the amendment we're specifically debating currently.
Let me ask one other question.
Sure, please.
If that new position increases it past $215,000, do you want me to reduce something else, or?
Or make it higher so it doesn't exceed it. I don't know what you do in this situation, but.
I'll have to reduce the different expenditure
Yeah,
then?
Yeah, I guess that works too.
Okay, so we'll move on to debate in regards to the amendment. Just to clarify, who was the second? Supervisor Gabbard, it was Supervisor Gabbard. So we'll move on. All ensuing debate is specifically on this amendment in terms of the verbiage of the change in positions and the 206,722 to 215,000. I'll call on Supervisor Eisen specifically on the amendment.
Not really, but I do have confidence in Supervisor Shorsey's insight and experience in these types of situations, and her research and contacts.
Very good. Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Norton, followed by Supervisor Defferty.
Thank you. A few years ago, Supervisor Launchlock and I met Dunn County. What they have a criminal justice coordinator, and I reviewed what she does, and then I reviewed what the person that we do similar to that position in our county, and Dr. Topo talked about it earlier. My question, a couple of things. Would that position of project coordinator that this amendment calls for be that person, I forget her name, that Dr. Topo talked about? Because in my opinion, when I looked at the job descriptions, that criminal justice coordinator, which they called it in the Dunn and many counties have, does what this person is supposed to do. So that's my general question I would ask is if that person, I can't remember her name, would she be given that duties and responsibilities, or
Sure.
would a new person be hired?
I'm going to go ahead and call on Supervisor Shorsey to answer your question.
When you're implementing a grant, it takes time. And so as this is envisioned, this person would be the one who'd actually be working on in the early implementation stages. If we go to a full program like La Crosse is eventually, because we find that this is just the best approach, then it would be, we'd be looking at permanent positions and, you know, a whole different, this person could grow into that, but it's not a criminal justice coordinator, it's a coordinator for the project, so it'd be called project coordinator, and that would be the job description. And the shared position would be because you're going to need a case manager. You know, we identified 2 case managers, so we actually, Dr. Topol might end up coming back later, depending on the volumes of people we're helping, may have to come back and say, okay, we need to move this project coordinator to full-time and get 2 full-time caseworker or case managers. So it's not the same as a criminal justice coordinator.
Thank you for your answer. Yeah, I guess I would like to I'd like to get Dr. Topol's perspective of would this be a new hire, or would this be what I just,
No.
I give added duties to the position who we call our quote-unquote criminal justice coordinator?
Certainly, we'll give Dr. Topol an opportunity to speak. Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey, for that clarification. Please, Dr. Topol.
The coordinator position would be a new position. The coordinator for Safe Streets and Drug Court, which we have now, her name is Carol Morak. She has a full caseload and wouldn't be available to take half of her time to do that. So I would envision, if you pass this, we'd hire a new coordinator, a new case manager, and we would have them also working, the new coordinator would be working to learn parts of her job from the coordinator of Safe Streets. The idea is to coordinate my staff and all of the private volunteers to make sure that when people are there that, you know, they establish a flow, a process, and they would obviously be working with the district attorney's office. It's his program, and so we would certainly, you know, it would be under my department for purposes of the budget, but it would be working under the clinical or the administrative supervision of the district attorney, and if I was needed, I could also participate in that.
Thank you, Director Topol. Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next speaker, Supervisor Defferting, followed by Supervisor Keller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do speak in favor of this amendment. I think part of this whole diversion thing is that we need to, this is kind of a marriage between the criminal justice part and Department of Health and Human Services. So that's where the coordinator would come in to make sure that that both sides are doing what their due diligence in this particular role. So yeah, this also will help establish a process for us, an official process, so that and that at that point we could figure out what works and what doesn't work after the 2-year trial.
Thank you, Supervisor Defferding. Next speaker, Supervisor Keller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support the change also, but I just would like to discuss the amount, the $215,000 approximately, which has been kind of an estimate adjustment for the difference in the classification of the positions. What we're not talking about is the building improvements. I think this was based on a certain remodeling estimate from our facilities director, who's not here. I don't have any idea at this point what's going to be required, because we're not going to put it where he thought we were going to put it. We're not going to do what he thought he was going to do. So whatever remodeling needs to be done is nobody's guess right now. I have no idea. So is the $7,100 enough? I don't know. I'd just like to make a warning that facilities might be coming back for more money. And I can't tell you how much that is going to be right now, or I'd try to make an amendment, but I have no idea. We will be coming back probably for more money. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Keller. All right, seeing no other call-ins, I know the finance director is working, no? Okay, seeing no other call-ins, let me recite where our amendment is at, okay? So the amendment is the verbiage change, which I think most of us are clear on. That's line 25, where it says creating the center, change the 2 to 1. So it's a 1 project position case manager. Then after that, adding the verbiage and 1 case manager / project coordinator, okay? It also changes the number of 206,722 to 215,000 in the title. It doesn't specify necessarily at this point where that additional 8,278 would go. And that in line 14, it would also change that number as well to 215, correct, to 215,000. All right, so we do have one other call, and Supervisor Wojciechowski.
This is just a point of clarification. Would we also have to change that in the title, because it says implementing 2 project position case managers? Do we need to change that to also reflect the change? I wasn't sure if you stated that.
No,
sorry.
that's a very good point. It would have to change it to implementing 1 project position case manager and 1 case manager / project coordinator. Okay? And that's consistent with what her amendment was, but it's a good point that I would need to clarify, okay? So, any other discussion? If we approve this, it doesn't say where the other 8,278, it just says another 8,278 would go to the initiative, is essentially what it would say. All right? Oh, you were trying to buzz in, Supervisor Connect? Oh, okay, Supervisor Warnke, I apologize, I didn't see you chime in there.
Well, you're not telling the whole truth here. If you're going to be adding jobs, don't you think you need to put that money into this?
That was with her intent. It's just that since we don't have the itemized numbers, what we'd be voting on would be the additional funding, not specifically where it goes in those line items. That is her intent, absolutely, but we can't change the numbers if we don't have them. We can only change the total.
Well, then let's postpone it and get the numbers.
And we can do that. There would have to be a motion. Oh, it sounds like the finance director is very close here. All right, we're going to give just a short bit here rather than postponing.
I mean, if you don't put those numbers into this, you're creating a false resolution here. It's going to be a lot more money.
It'll be the same money. It just wouldn't specify where the additional 8,278 would go amongst those approximately 10 to 12 categories. But I agree, ideally, it would be nice to be able to itemize it out. I certainly wouldn't argue with you there. That's what they're working on in the back. I'll call on Supervisor Norton.
Since we have a little time here, Mr. Chairman, much to talk about the expense that would be to remodel whatever area for this program. Is there any way we can get Mr.
That
Elder?
would be out of order, so because we're on the amendment.
Well, we have a break here, and that's why.
I know, but we have to stick with what we're voting on right now. So I appreciate what you're saying, but this is what we're on currently. All right, I believe we have the numbers.
Totals with the new wages and with everything as it stands is 209,779. So then I will have to take, what did I just say 209,779? So 5,221, and I guess I will just take that and add it to building improvements since we're curious about that, or where would you like me to add that, I guess? You tell me, there's office supplies, so in the DA's office, there's small equipment technology, and office supplies, all for their workspaces. And then in facilities, I have the $7,100 for building improvements. So if you could tell me which one you are. Pardon? We already that's with adjusting pay. I still have that extra because she wanted to put it to $215,000.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah.
Adjusting pay only brings it up to 209,000.
209,779.
209,779.
Thank you, yeah, 779.
779, so there's another 5,000, like you said, 221, that would have to be distributed to the other numbers if we are, if you are voting on the amendment to the 215.
Exactly.
You could, actually, I think, and if we have an objection, but your intent was to change the pay, and what we're learning now is it didn't require up to 215. It required up to 209,779. So I'm going to offer that and accept that as a friendly amendment unless there's any objection, because that was her intent, was to increase the pay.
Okay.
Okay, so just to clarify, we're gonna say it all over again, okay? But now, before we do that,
double check.
let's get the new numbers specifically for regular pay, FICA, health.
Okay.
From the finance.
All right, so for regular pay, it will go to $107,057, so 107,057. For FICA, it'll be $8,190. Health insurance will still be $45,828. Dental will still be $21,744. Workers' comp will be $61. Wisconsin retirement will be $7,226. And fringe benefits other will be $643.
And just to clarify, did you say workers' compensation would be 61?
Yeah, they realized they gave me it before a typo.
Okay, so that's.
There was a typo somehow.
So actually, that number is less because it's a clarification of what the actual
Correct.
number should have been.
Correct.
It's, instead of 616, it's 61.
Yes.
And then FICA was 8,190.
FICA was 8,190, yes.
Okay, so I am going to attempt to say all this over again. So, starting again, the amendment we've been debating and the number change. So going back to the beginning, line 25, creating this center, comma, change the 2 to 1 project position case manager, then adding the verbiage, and 1 case manager / project coordinator position. Then in the title, you are going to change 206,722 to 209,779.
Correct.
Okay, then you're also going to change on line 14, 206,722 to 209,779. Then on the itemized numbers below for regular pay, it would change to $107,057. FICA Medicare would change to $8,190. Health insurance would stay the same at $45,828. Dental insurance would stay the same at $2,174. Workers' compensation would be lowered to $61, 61 total. Wisconsin retirement would change to $7,226. Fringe benefits other would change to $643. That is the actual amendment. It's really what we've been discussing with simply the friendly change to the numbers and the distribution as I just outlined. Is everyone clear on that? Okay? And we missed one. In the title, when it says implementing two, to reflect what we actually did, it'll say implementing one project position case manager and one case manager / project coordinator. Okay? We got one other call-in, Supervisor Wojciechowski.
So just so we know, because we don't have an estimate, or we don't know where this is going to be now that we've changed it, we're fine with keeping the building improvements because we don't have an estimate. And if we pass this, we're expecting that facilities will probably come in if the money's higher, if the cost is higher. Just to clarify for everyone, that's how we're voting on this.
Very good. Any other discussion before we go to a vote? And just as a reminder, this is a vote on the amendment, and we're back on the main motion as amended 3 times. Okay? So vote aye if you want to approve the amendment with all the changes I recited. Vote no if you don't. And that motion carries 29-0. So now we're back on the main motion as amended. So we've had 3 amendments. Any further discussion on the main motion as now amended? Okay? No? Seeing none? Oh, Supervisor Conrad.
Yeah, thank you. I do have a couple questions, Mr. Chairman. So we're adding 2 positions into the human services line, which the budget page is showing we're going from 262 to 263 on page 375. So that number would actually go from 262 in 2019 to 264 in 2020? Does that make sense? Okay. And then, okay. That makes sense. My only other comment is I'm a little concerned that we don't have any memorandums of understanding from our community partners outside of county government as we move this forward. I think it's a great idea. I'm all in favor of getting people help if they want to get it. I just want to make sure as we're moving forward that we're not spending $200,000 this year, $200,000 next year for something that we're all hoping is going to work, and we may not have the other partners in place already. My concern is, are we moving this a little too fast, and would there be a little more time? And just voicing my opinion on that.
Thank you, Supervisor Conrad. Next speaker, Supervisor Fari, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concern is with the building improvements, 1029-5802 at $7,100. Now that, somebody explained, was for a 3rd floor remodel for a couple of walls or something. If that's correct, obviously, I think the focus of this board is to remodel the basement. Is that my understanding? Mm-hmm. Well, and I support that, it's a great idea, but $7,100 ain't gonna remodel that basement. So we need a number to put in there, or how do you want to handle this? Because basically, you're passing something without actually declaring where you're going to remodel and put it, and at what cost.
I'll call on the finance director.
I did pull up the estimate I got from Mike Elder just to see what it said it was for. And so he did say it was for the Oren King Building 1st and 3rd floor per the DA's office sketch, it says. So that is thinking of the first floor. And it was removing walls and electricity and then installing, by repairing walls, installing a door, repair ceiling. So it's very, very minimal. The biggest cost was replacing carpet.
Okay.
So I think it's a very minimal, and it was mostly thinking of moving her to the third floor, knocking out a wall and updating some.
So in essence, that's off the table right now. We're looking at the basement.
So that's all I have.
And I suspect that's gonna be 80,000 plus. I mean, I'll just take a guess. So how do you wanna handle this as a board? Do you wanna leave that, I mean,
I would suggest you're asking my opinion or our opinion, I would suggest you leave it as is. This is coming from the undesignated fund balance. Once we learn more about what the modifications would be, you'd always have that opportunity and still be able to take it from the same fund. So I would suggest, if you don't have enough information to know what to do, don't add that part. That'd be my suggestion.
I just don't wanna get into a position where we're gonna be debating and arguing about the location and how much it's gonna cost at a future date. I think this commits the board to proceeding forward, and I'd be a little more comfortable if I could amend this, put a number in there, but I think I'll do that. I'm gonna move to amend 7,100 to $80,000.
Okay.
Right on 1029-58002.
Okay, so the amendment would be, okay, thank you, actually. There's a motion and a second. So the amendment would be to add building improvements from 7,100 to 80,000, basically an increase of 72,900 in that. And that would be for page 203.
If
So
I
there's
might
a,
elaborate, that is simply to ensure that if they do decide to use the basement, and hopefully they will, the funds will be there to accommodate that. This would obviously alleviate further debate on whether we should use the basement, et cetera, et cetera.
okay, and so there was a motion and a second, and just to clarify the motion, because I'm quite certain of his intent, so he was increasing that to 80,000, that's 72,900 added to this resolution, which would mean we would have to change the numbers again in the title from the 209,779 to 282,677, and we would do the exact same thing on line 14. I'm sure that's what your intent would be as well.
79.
79, I apologize. So the total would be 282,679. Okay? All right, so discussion in regards to the amendment specifically. I'll call on Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Mr. Fari's amendment. In fact, I was going to make one myself for $10,221 more than what he said, but I'm perfectly happy with the 80,000, so I'll let somebody else talk. Thank you.
All right, I'll call on Supervisor Shorsey.
I believe I can address both Supervisor Fari and Supervisor Conrad. So in terms of a project coordinator, one of the very important things that we have not been seeing that we would see from a project coordinator is detailed program plans and then the budgets that would I can't think of the word, accompany the plan. So it should be fleshed out. Also, the MOUs would be part of what that project coordinator would be doing, because we have to have a very clear understanding from partners what they can and cannot do and what they're willing to do or not. So that should come out of the project coordinator's work, that there is much more clarity to what we're doing.
All right.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Seeing no other call-ins, I'll reiterate the amendment, and then we'll go to a roll call vote, because we've been doing that with each of these amendments. So that is to change the building improvements line from 7,100 to 80,000. to change in the title the 209,779 to 282,679, and to change the same numbers as well on line 14. Okay? So we'll go to a roll call vote on that. Vote aye if you want to approve that change. Vote no if you don't. This is only on the amendment again, a new amendment. Oh. Could someone, are you able to do it? Okay? Oh, we're okay. And that motion carries 23-5. All right, so now we are back on the main motion, once again, as amended with each of the 4 amendments we have made. Okay? Are we all clear on that? Okay? Any other discussion? No? Then we'll go to a roll call vote on the motion as amended. Vote aye if you approve, vote no if you don't. I don't agree with all of to reach counseling services. I'll call on Supervisor Bender.
I guess I went to a few diversity meetings with Mike, and a lot of people are intimidated. when
Supervisor Bender, do you want to make a motion to approve and get a second?
A motion to, yeah, I'll make a motion to move.
Okay, please go ahead, Supervisor Bender.
I went to a few of these diversity meetings, and what it seems is people of color sometimes are intimidated by coming to county buildings. It's like the Christine Ann Center. You can go there, you don't have to feel like, some people don't speak good English, and they have this fear that maybe their paperwork ain't exactly right. You know, these people at REACH basically give them the counseling they need, get them into a system where they get the insurance they need and the reassurance that they are going to be covered and they'll take care of their problem. They deal with abused people every day, you know, and I had a cousin that basically went to the Christine Ann Center, and I was grateful that they were there. And a place like this will do the same thing.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. Next speaker, Supervisor Wingren, followed by Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a really well-intentioned resolution. I understand that. Remember last year, we all got a letter from one of the leaders of this group asking for money. And this was brought in as an amendment. And I didn't support it then, I won't support it now, because, number one, this year they didn't even ask. And two, there's so many wonderful groups of people in our community throughout the county to help people. Father Carr, Salvation Army, you know, on and on and on and on and on. Why don't we give to all of them? Why would we pick just one to give to? And the other thing is, aren't we just duplicating the service that the county already presents? We are here to offer services to people in need. I think that's wonderful. But to offer just to one group, we didn't even ask for it. It doesn't seem right to me.
Thank you, Supervisor Wingren. Next speaker is Supervisor Norton, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you. A couple of things I want to address. First, though, the $25,000 that REACH receives in the human service budget is for direct abuse services to clients in Winnebago County who have no insurance or are living near poverty. REACH is unique in the work they do. While many therapists can do trauma-informed counseling, REACH specializes in trauma-specific therapy to victims of violence and abuse only. REACH does not say that it addresses all mental health issues as other clinics do. REACH focuses on sexual and physical abuse only. REACH is trained in evidence-based treatment models and in called on when other organizations have questions or concerns. They're also the #1 referral source in the Valley for abuse-related trauma. What they're asking for through me, and I'll address what Supervisor Wingren says, they asked for it last year, we turned them down, and I went to the county executive with Lynn Byer, the executive director, and asked, could you put this in the budget as part of the budget? And I tell you, I and Lynn Byer thought we had the county executive convinced that this was going to be included in the budget. I said I would support it, and I think I have other people who support it. And yes, I'll answer your question, and the board can question it, but I didn't ask him to put it in the budget. And I tell you, we came away thinking, I think he's going to do it. Then he talked to Dr. Topol, and Dr. Topol said, well, he doesn't want to do it because it would be unique. And I told the county executive, well, they are not the only ones who are unique. We give $80,000 to AVCAP for doing a unique program. We didn't bid that out. We didn't give that to anyone else. We do that. Also, back before I was on the board, I believe, we bailed out a nonprofit who needed bailout, Clarity Care maybe wouldn't be around here now if we bailed them out then. So don't tell me that we don't point out people or help people, especially who have specific services. And REACH Counseling Service is very specific. They do things that other organizations do. You know, and they may come back, and Bill Topol may come back and say, well, human service therapists do it. Well, they don't have the extensive education and the therapists that REACH would have. REACH would be reducing their waiting list, and they would have a minimum of 25 new clients a year and more. They have a backlog of needing their services. I think it's very much needed. And as I hope most of you remember, they came before this board in September when Marianne Riley talked about their services. And we didn't get budget in the budget because I didn't think that was appropriate. But I think it's appropriate now to ask for again. You know, Bill Topo talked about earlier about they're trying to do sex trafficking. Well, you know, REACH Counseling Services, Lynn Byer told me, that's got a grant for 6 months to address that issue. This is a service, this is an organization that specializes in the service more than any other organizations. And I may hear feedback, well, other organizations are contracted. They don't do the type of services that REACH Counseling Services do it. And I'll challenge anyone to prove that to me. And that's why I think it's a reasonable request. Their request of $40,000, I tell you, it would pay to have them hire a new therapist, which money would go for, it would cost them $80,000. They're only asking for half that. And after it's trained, then they will be able to sustain the revenue on themselves by having a full-time therapist through insurance and other ways. So that's what they're asking for. I think it's reasonable. I think we should help people who need their services the most, and I think they need it. You know, I don't know why we have to keep I think if we have someone who has a service who does it very well in this county, like REACH Counseling Service, I think that should be sourced. I said it once, I said it before, I'll say it again. We learned earlier that we don't spend all the amount we do for contractor services. Well, this is not a contractor service. This is a specific grant to help with a specific service. I think that if we do this, I think they could alleviate the mental health division in the county human services, and they could address the other type of cases that they have to address. You know, I asked Dr. Topol, when Dr. Topol kind of dismissed this at the Human Services Budget meeting in 2018, he told us that he was going to come back and tell us the plan how to address their waiting list. I've never seen it, I've never heard of it, and I don't know if there is any. I also, at this budget and Human Services, I asked, what kind of different cases does the Mental Health Division do? I've not seen that yet. I guess I'm concerned because here we have a service in this county who does it, who has, I think, a simple request to provide a service that is much needed. That is why I think this amendment should pass a one-time $40,000 grant to REACH Counseling Services.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. I'll call on Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Binder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can recall special orders meeting that we had when a representative of REACH presented their program and the services that they offer. I can remember last year, they asked for an additional $25,000, which was not acknowledged and rejected. This year, at that special orders meeting, I had a discussion with the REACH representative, and he explained to her, Winnebago County Human Services has contractual commitments of almost $18 million that we are purchasing services from vendors such as REACH. And I said, the appropriate way, if you want some money from the county, would be to go and bid on one of the contracts and get a contract with the county. And the representative said, well, yeah, that's a good idea. We'll follow through, or whatever they'll do. I won't support this because with the $18 million that we spend with private organizations, both profit and non-profit, if the department wanted the services of this organization, they would have had a contract with them, but they don't.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker, Supervisor Binder, followed by Supervisor Fari.
I guess I'd like to say, we do have good therapists, and they basically are general, all-around good at what they do. These people specialize in what they do. It's like when I go to my doctor and I need a hip replacement, he doesn't say, well, I'll see you next week Thursday, I'll put a hip in for you. He refers me to somebody that's what they do for a living. That's what they do, hips and knees every day. So they're good at it. And that's what these people do every day. They deal with abuse, sex trafficking, and when you're down and out and you need somebody to listen to you and you tell them the problems that you have, it doesn't matter if it's 5:30 at night, we toured that facility and they were counseling people. They don't quit at 4 o'clock because, we work 8 to 4. They basically, if you have a need, you call them, they're going to give you the help that you need. I mean, they're asking for one time to help them out to get this person started. We give $65,000 to the Christian Ann Center, and it's some of the best money we'll ever spend. You have to think, if your loved one is ever in that position, if your 18-year-old daughter got abused by somebody on the street and they're basically needing help, what would you do? You'd be very happy to get them there and get them the help that they need. It's real easy to say, well, why should we give it to them? Well, why shouldn't we? We're in here to serve the community, to help them, give them the services that they need. We just approved $300,000 to try to help people stay out of jail. Here we're trying to help women or men get back on their feet that have been abused, that they haven't had a fair shake in life. So I urge everybody to support this. It's a one-time cost.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. Next speaker, Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I need some clarification, and perhaps you can help me. This resolution specifies to add $40,000 to the miscellaneous unclassified department's budget account number 1039-53565, operating grants account, on page 552. Well, I'm looking at that line, and that is $2,707,410. Am I correct? Am I on the right line?
Yes.
Okay, so what we're saying is what Mr. Binder was referring to is they already get some money from this grant?
No,
Or you want to add 40,000 to this $2 million plus? so they can receive some money from that line item.
If you look on page, I also said page 554, that's that schedule of the different operating grants, the different monies we give to like AdvoCap and the county fair and such.
Yes?
That's where we would add that 40,000 into that schedule, which would add to that $2 million figure.
Okay, so you're gonna add this group to that schedule.
Correct.
And allowing them $40,000.
Right.
Well, once they're in there, it's not one-time money, it's in there every year, right?
Well, that's up to the county I work with the county executive to put that schedule together. If we only promise it for 1 year, then we would take it back out the next year. We would just show that we did that in prior years.
I don't see where the one-year inclusion is in the resolution. Does it say 1 year somewhere?
You know, it does not.
So it would be in there continuously.
It could
No,
be.
because everything we're voting on today is
Right.
technically one time in the sense that it's the
Right.
budget for 2020.
Okay, so then the county exec would have the option of whether or not to add it next year, or for 2021.
And
That
you
would be correct, or this body, again, if it so chose, would always have that.
Okay, I understand, thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other call-ins? Did I miss anybody? All right, very good. So why don't we go ahead and do a roll call vote? Vote aye if you approve the amendment, which is to add $40,000 to miscellaneous unclassified for REACH counseling services. Vote no if you do not want to. And that motion carries 20-8. So we're moving then to the third amendment. And that's resolution number 233-10-2019. Amendment 3 adds $66,023 to the airport's budget for the purpose of creating a deputy airport director position. I'll call on Supervisor Konetsky.
Mr. Chairman, I move for resolution 233-102019.
There's a motion, is there a second? Second. There's a motion and a second. Further discussion? I'll call on Supervisor Gabbard, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
Question, is it appropriate for the airport director to speak on this, to clarify?
If you want to yield the floor to them, that would be your right to do so.
Okay, I'll yield the floor to Director Shell.
Please, Director Shell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Supervisor Gabbard. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this. I'll keep my comments fairly brief. I know it's been a long day, and I appreciate all the work the county board's done this far in the 2020 budget session. What I'll start off with is saying I do appreciate the county board's support on a number of airport initiatives, and this perhaps is one of the most important things the county board will decide on in the next few years for the airport. It's really in the spirit of moving the airport forward and really starting to capitalize on all the opportunities we do have at the airport. What I'll say about the new position request overall is it's a need versus a want. This is not a want, right? This is a need for the airport. That being said, I identified the need for this position in the first few months that I started here at the airport. I will relay just a little bit back to my time in Cheyenne. I was in Cheyenne, Wyoming at that airport for 10 years. For the last 6, I was the assistant airport director until the county executive and the HR director and Mr. Warnke were in my interview and hired me to be the airport director for this airport. That being said, that airport had 9 staff, this airport has 8. The only thing different as far as the structure goes is an assistant airport director, deputy airport director. They're very similar airports, so I only compare them not because I was there in Cheyenne for 10 years, but they're very similar airports in a lot of respects. I certainly would have brought this, that's probably the elephant in the room, right? I certainly would have brought this position request in the natural budget process in the July timeframe and then reviewed it with the county executive and finance and everyone else in that meeting in August when we had that meeting. However, had a couple of other items in its place. Not to say those items were more important or less important, they were simply in the place, and there's only so much money every year, right? So unfortunately, those couple of items were removed during the executive review process, which didn't really, I hadn't had this position fully fleshed out at that point in time with the job description and everything that I needed to bring it forward. So all that being said, this position is very important. We've got a number of things that I'll just kind of walk you through the amendment that I would highlight. I'd like to just remind the board the approximate $52,000 reduction year over year from 2019 to 2020 in our operating levy amount. I think that's a huge step in the right direction, and I'll also go back one more year and say that we reduced our levy from 2018 to 2019. So we're making strides in that realm, and this position would only help us to expedite those financial gains. I can't promise we'll be a self-sustaining airport in the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 30 years. However, that is the ultimate long-term goal, and in keeping with that, one more reminder is that we passed the amendment to the EA lease, and I only bring that up because that was the prior meeting, but I only bring that up as it's an additional $116,000 on an annual basis from an existing lease. That was a monumental, in my opinion, 25 years in the making lease amendment, which translates to revenue, which is what we're talking about today, and of course expenses. So when we talk about expenses, $66,023 would be, at this point in time, a reduction of our airport fund balance, which I think the finance director has that more readily available than I do, but I have a ballpark, I know what that is. And that simply will be a one-time expense, taking it from the fund balance. It certainly would not be my intent, as I said this morning, to take a recurring expense item and continually, year after year, take it from the fund balance. That would be irresponsible, to say the least. How we're doing that, if you read through the budget amendment, we're making actually a couple concessions. Since this wasn't brought in the regular cycle, we're making 2 concessions at the bottom of those line items. One is the promotions account for the airport, which I already trimmed the prior year. This would be another trimming of that. However, it still leaves us $30,000 for the year, and I feel that's a more than adequate amount of money to accomplish our 2020 goals in that realm. This also has a reduction in $16,000 in the grounds maintenance account. That's simply one project that can be deferred to 2021. It's not going to hurt us by any means in 2020. Simply a hangar painting project, but it's mostly cosmetic, but it does need to be done. But it can wait. So the last piece is that in order to hopefully set your mind at ease as well, there are numerous initiatives that we're continuing to work on at the airport to increase revenue and reduce expenses, right? That is the financial long-term goals for, I think, hopefully all departments, but I can't speak for all departments. And there's real prospects in the works, and not just prospects, but they're sort of low-hanging fruit, if you will, in order to do both of those things in 2020, in 2021. However, what I will say is that I'm one person. I have an operations and maintenance manager that's very good at his job. I have an administrative associate that's very good at her job. They're both going to retire most likely in the next few years, and I will have to replace them. However, this position is an added position. It's a needed position, and if the county board were to approve it, I think you're going to see a lot more expedient improvements in the airport and revenue gains and expense reductions where possible. So that hopefully was concise enough, and I'd certainly answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Schell. I'll call next on Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Ellis.
That's a pretty hard act to follow. I was going to ask that the airport director explain the details. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schell. I support this.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Ellis.
Thank you, Chairman. Likewise, probably with me also, but what I don't really like to have this come up at a budget. I'd like to see it come up at a county board meeting or special orders or something like that. You get a whole total job description of what his jobs is going to be there, and then you get everything in the wages and the fringes and this and that. This is normal, the way that we add on in departments. Thank you.
Director Schell, did you want to provide some follow-up information?
Certainly, I appreciate the comments, and I certainly would typically bring this in the regular process. This is not to say that I'm new at this for the county, but it's my second budget that I've put together. That being said, we do have a job description. It's in draft format. The county HR director has taken a look at it. We still may have a few tweaks to make to that. However, I'd say it's mostly there. Quite honestly, I'd say it's, in my opinion, 95 or 98% of the way there. There might be a few small changes. However, we haven't circulated that job description to the full county board because it's in draft format. My committee members did receive a draft copy of that job description, and I think they're all in support of it. I think I got a few comments from Supervisor Konetsky along the lines of what I plan to do when this new position, should it be approved. Well, no doubt there is a bit of overlap from a pure job description standpoint if you compared the two. I need assistance, and that assistance does not come in the form of the existing staff that they can provide the things, the skills, the abilities, the experience to run an airport the way it's supposed to be run, and to move things forward. If we were status quo and we were just trying to maintain and not do a single thing else, then we could survive with 8 employees. And that's really what I think you've seen for probably 15 years. So that's my response.
Thank you, Director Schell. And thank you, Supervisor Ellis. Next speaker, Supervisor Binder.
I guess I'd like to just say, we took and got a new airport director, and if we don't give him the tools to move the airport forward, our airport will remain like it's been for the last 20 years. We got an industrial park out there, we got a new airport director. He's telling us this is what he needs to move this airport forward. If we don't have faith in him, then it'll be like every other director. They'll try and we won't give them the tools they need, and it'll just be basically the same old airport that we've had for the last 20 years. I think if the man says he needs this person to move this airport forward, we approve the taxiway for the industrial park. We need to get somebody in the industrial park. The city's put a lot of money in there for the utilities, the land. We got 50 acres that we paid over $1 million for. I just think we need to give him the tools so that he has the opportunity to show us that he's going to get that airport back on its feet, and maybe we can get some freight shipments coming in here and get some basically industrial business in the industrial park and move forward. I mean, if it doesn't happen, what are we going to do with that airport? So we already stuck a lot of money in there. We got the industrial park, we got the taxiway going in there. If he needs one more piece to the puzzle to do this, I think it's silly to tell him no and to wait. And we know if he has to bring this back to the full county board, it's going to take 2/3. Today it only takes the majority. So, if you want to see the airport move forward, Outagamie County's way ahead of us. Fond du Lac County's basically got a better airport than we have. And when I used to go to Mercury, it was like nothing. All they had there was a little taxiway. And now they got a beautiful industrial park out there. They got a nice aviation center. And we just stay status quo. I think it's time to move forward and invest in our airport and move to the future.
Thank you, Supervisor Binder. Next speaker, Supervisor Finch, followed by Supervisor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Supervisor Bender is right on the button. Let's move to the future. Many of you older supervisors know my feelings on the airport. However, I told the gentleman after he was hired, I'm going to support him 100%. Because just the way he talked, he means a lot for the airport, but more important, he means more for Winnebago County. So I urge everybody to be like me and vote yes and give him the benefit of the doubt. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. Next speaker, Supervisor Smith.
Thank you. I agree with my other fellow board members that we have spent money on. We need to develop the airport. Right now, it's at a point that it's becoming attractive to businesses outside, and we need to do everything we can to keep it that way. So I urge that you vote yes.
Thank you, Supervisor Smith. Next speaker, Supervisor Gabbard.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I have to. So I appreciate all the great comments everybody's made. I appreciate your support for the airport. I think we're moving in the right direction. We have a good director. Things are happening out there. He's got his plate full, and I'm not saying he can't handle the plate, but there are things that he could designate for the deputy director, and Jim could work on other things that are bigger items. I don't think this is a big budget expense, and it's too bad that we brought it in this way. I understand that, but I think it can be done, and if you would approve it, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gabbard. Seeing no other call-ins, The amendment is to add $66,023 to the airport's budget for the purpose of creating a deputy airport director position. No objection. I'll attempt to do a voice vote on this. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Moving to the next amendment. That's Amendment 4, which is Resolution 233-102019. Transfer $10,000 from the County Fair Association Entertainment Use of Stage line and add it to the County Fair Association line of the miscellaneous unclassified budget. I'll call on Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for the approval of resolution number 33102019.
There's a motion and a second to approve amendment number 4. I'll open it for discussion. Go ahead, Vice Chairman Egan.
I won't talk on it very long because I think you heard me before. That was put in there, and whether the county executive meant it the way it was or whatever, but I just didn't think that it was put in right. It was $50,000, and then he went ahead and put, if we use the stage, he'd give us another $10,000. Well, I did talk to the new president of the Fair Association, and they will go ahead and try to work with the promoter to go ahead and see if they can work out something charging to use the grandstand and the stage. But you know, that isn't the way right now it is set up. It's you pay one and you can go into the grandstand or into the music festivals, you can go on the rides and all this and that. So you'd have to change everything around in whether they'll do it or not. But he did promise that he would go ahead and try and work with one of the promoters. But here again, is the promoter going to go ahead and make it reasonable enough so that they can? And how much money are they going to want out of it? Is the fair going to be able to make any money? So I ask if you will support this for this year again. I won't say I won't be back again next year, but I would like to ask for that $60,000 again this year, please.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll go to a voice vote. All those in favor of amendment number 4 say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to the next amendment. So this is the other 3 amendments that came in about a half an hour ago. So amendment number 5 is to reduce the Human Services 2020 budget, line item group home account by $200,000. I'll call on Supervisor Eisen.
I move for the approval of resolution number 233-102019.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 233-10-2019, specifically amendment 05 of it. Discussion. I'll call on Supervisor. Did you have anything further, Supervisor? No? Okay, I'll call on Supervisor Finch, followed by Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I cannot and I will not support this resolution. Reason being is that there's many people out in Winnebago County that needs help. Rather, we got $500,000 to help them, $200,000, whatever. But the people themselves need the help. They're not completely together like many of us here are. And to turn around so you can save yourself some money and take $200,000 away from Human Services that are trying to help people, especially our own Winnebago County people, it's terrible. It's truly terrible. I am hoping everybody votes my way and say no. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. Next speaker, Supervisor Fari, followed by Supervisor Gabbard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I need to give credit where credit is due, and I want to thank Mr. Eisen for doing the research which you've all been made available to. I think it's obvious based on the money that is being not used by that department over a period of 9 years in the amount of $1 million plus going all the way up to $3 million per year. It clearly denotes that this department is over budgeted. Now, in reference to will this harm that department or put them in a position where they don't have enough flexibility? Because I understand the argument from Mr. Topol that many of these things are budgeted items that you can't put a definitive number on, so it needs to have some flexibility. I agree with that, and I think even taking this money out of their budget certainly allows them ample flexibility. I mean, I'm looking at 2017, and they returned $3,631,000. The lowest one they returned was in 2013, and that was over $1 million. So removing in total $240,000 from their budget is the adequate and proper thing to do in this specific case. So I did sign on to this. I do support it. I think it's pretty obvious that that department can have their budget reduced this small amount, actually compared to millions, and not have any negative impact on that department.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker, Supervisor Gabbard, followed by Supervisor Brunn.
Supervisor Fari answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gabbard. Next speaker, Supervisor Brunn, followed by Vice Chairman Egan. Nope. All right, very good. Thank you. Next speaker, Vice Chairman Egan, followed by Supervisor Wingrid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure, I think Dr. Topol said that he had worked with you, but he definitely didn't want it taken out of that group home account, if I remember correctly. I'm looking at them, and so right away I see the first place that, and I admire you three that signed on here and trying everything possible. That's what we're put on this board for. But I see 200,000 coming right out of the group home. I don't know if the three of you had talked to Dr. Topol or not, or have asked him if there's other places that this could be worked out, if we really want to go with this amount of money. But that was one of the big things he said. I thought, please don't take it out of the homes. And when I see $200,000, that would be my only criticism, is that if he thought it can come out of some other place and work with it, it would be fine, but not to take it out of the homes.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. Next speaker, Supervisor Wingren, followed by Supervisor Nussbaum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, it's getting late. Numbers, numbers, numbers. They're coming out of our ears and coming out of our ears is where it's coming from. The budget process is a tough one. It should be. As I said before, a budget really is a bunch of goals with numbers attached. We deal with more than numbers. The human services. Let's think about that. Human. Not just a number, a person. Usually a person that needs our help. I believe strongly that government exists to provide a safety net to people who can't help themselves. And our county does a wonderful job of that. We could always do better, and we'll always try. I trust Dr. Topol. He and his staff do a wonderful job with limited resources and barrels of red tape. Can you imagine those forms he fills out that nobody reads probably? The key word that someone used earlier was flexible. We need to let him run his department. We need to trust him, not micromanage. Let's deal with humans, not just random numbers. Let's just not do this at all.
Thank you, Supervisor Wingrid. Next speaker, Supervisor Nussbaum, followed by Supervisor Norton.
Thank you. This budget is definitely padded. Historically, the evidence is there, and I wish this amendment was just for the total and let the department head take care of where it comes out. But even if we reduced it this amount, we wouldn't be hanging anybody out to dry, because if an emergency came up or something happened, we would still be able to pay. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Nussbaum. Next speaker, Supervisor Norton, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
Well, I may be repeating myself, but a couple of things. The Human Service Department already has cut a $500,000 more than they were supposed to the first time the budget round. As the county executive came around in August and asked for a $500,000 cut, which they've done. One place they cut was from the unused labor, if I'm correct, Vicki, I'm correct. I believe, and that's my assertion, I kind of said it before, I think a lot of these surpluses come from that department. When I looked at it, I got some figures from Vicki's department. Continuing for the last 3-4 years, we've gotten very large labor costs returned back to the county. That's another reason I wouldn't oppose it. Another oppose it, Dr. Topol is right. And I said before, every month at our human service meeting, we get a graph of the placements that he has to do in youth and adult, and this would be group homes, I believe, I could be wrong, for youth. And that could fluctuate, because you don't know how many people have to be put in there, and you know what those costs are going to be. So that's fluid. You know, and this padding, as someone called it, well, that padding is used because you don't know if Dr. Topol says, you don't know if you're going to use it. And this padding, that was called, if we don't spend it, where does it go? And as Supervisor Albrecht said earlier, it goes back to the general reserve. Like I say, the Human Service Department and Dr. Topol has done their part, more than done their part, by cutting the $500,000 more that the county executive asked of them after we had our human service budget meetings. So I urge you not to support this.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next speaker, Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the numbers speak for themselves. It takes you 2 years to compare the adopted budget item and the actual. And it was very clear for the last 9 years, annually, there was an excess of over $1 million. However, when you're going to make a reduction in expenses, you have to be specific. And I attempted to be specific with the tools that I had provided to me by the county, which is this budget book. This budget book gives the executive's request. It gives us a history of the past. And there are also other budget books that are available through the website for the county that you can see what the expenses were, what the requests were, and what the actual expenses and dollars appropriated were. The numbers speak for themselves. I talked to Dr. Topol. I picked this particular budget item, which is on page 420. It's Object 55046. In 2019, $850,000 was adopted. The projected amount for 2019 in their budget is $458,094. The request in the executive approved $650,000. Now, I've asked that this $650,000 be reduced by $200,000. And the reason I picked that number is because Dr. Topol's numbers himself, or his department themselves, have given us a projected amount that this item will consume $458,000. So I'm only going to ask for next year the amount that is projected to be spent this year. That's reasonable for a amateur accountant, given the tools of the budget and given the time that I'm enabled to appropriate to this. Dr. Topol was not able to give me an alternate account to consider, or he was unwilling to commit to an account to consider. And so it becomes the responsibility of this Board of Supervisors, when you see that a budget item, when you see that a department is exceeding their requests by in excess of $1 million for 9 years in a row, and you're going to perpetuate that excess, shame on you if you don't approve this.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker, Supervisor Fari, followed by Supervisor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to follow up on Mr. Egan's comment. I think Mr. Eisen has answered that. He did confer with Mr. Tobel, that's my understanding. So does that satisfy your?
I don't know how long he's satisfied. If you're asking me, I don't know. I don't know. Alls I know is he said he didn't really want it out of the group homes, but he'd work with it and get that number down. And then all of a sudden I see the 200 coming out of the group homes.
Okay, I believe Mr. Eisen did say he conferred.
I can clarify that.
If I may yield to Mr. Eisen.
Okay, go ahead. Please go ahead,
Okay.
Supervisor Eisen. And then we'll be back to Supervisor Fari.
When I conferred with Dr. Topol, he said to me, put in your resolution a general reduction of $200,000 to be determined and designed by the director and by the executive. When this was presented to the Corporation Council, she advised them that you have to be specific in putting an account to reduce. And so she would not accept what Dr. Topol acknowledged was how he wanted to go about doing it. He admits, or he concedes, that, you know, there's wiggle room for $240,000, but he was unable, or he was unwilling to specify that here. I sent him an email with this Sunday, sometime between then and now. He had read it, so he knew it by when he came into to the budget session. I did not want to just spring this on him. I notified, I emailed the chairman, I emailed the county executive that this was coming down the pike, in hopes that they could identify an area which would better serve the purposes of reducing that expense. It is what it is, and I think it's this board's responsibility to own up and realize that they're getting over budgeted.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. We're back to Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the question has been clarified, hopefully to the satisfaction of everyone. Obviously, Mr. Eisen has tried repeatedly, if you might recall, I had to rise to a point of order to get a general consensus from the body, which is not proper, actually, before bringing this forward. So I believe he's done the best he can to accommodate the wishes of Mr. Topol. Corp Counsel prefers that it be done on a line item with an account number, so we're simply abiding by that. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker, Supervisor Smith, followed by Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate Mr. Eisen going through the work he did, taking a look at the budgets, going back. And there's something else that he had brought up, but I realized over a period of time. Human services is more utilized in times of trouble. In other words, when we have an economy that's in trouble, people are having a hard time finding work, these services are used more. On the other hand, the last 3 years, our economy has increased. It's the best it's been in a number of years in all areas, with employment for minorities, everything else. Therefore, these services will be less used than they have been in the past. So taking $200,000 out of a bloated budget to begin with makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Smith. Next speaker is Supervisor Shorsey, followed by Supervisor Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pretty conflicted about this. I think it's great that Supervisor Eisen did identify an issue, and actually it's an issue that has been discussed by some of us before in terms of just the need to have more budget discipline. And so I'm just not sure that focusing on one division is really appropriate at this time. And perhaps as we improve some of our areas, and I wish Vicki had not stepped out, but you know, that it's part of a bigger picture and a bigger issue as opposed to just focusing in on one division. So I think I'm going to say no to this just because of that reason, that I do believe it is an issue for the county. Obviously, Human Services is the largest, you know, one of the largest budgets, so we might start there anyway. And then there's the whole issue of, for these divisions that, you know, the Sheriff's Department, the Human Services, perhaps looking at, from a policy perspective, having an operating reserve fund so they can sharpen their pencils on their budgets, but yet not have to go through an inordinate amount of approval to get to access to funds should they have a spike in need. So I think that's going to be my position, is that no for now. Definitely it's part of a bigger issue that needs to be addressed over time.
Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Next speaker, Supervisor Finch, followed by Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I'd like to ask the people here is to put themselves in a place where you need help. And we say no. That's capital N, capital O. Find your own help. We will not help you. Then what are we doing here? What are we as a body doing here? We were voted in by people. Whether you need the help or you don't need help, we're still voted in by the people. And for some people who want to take $200,000 out to help these people, it's unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. I'm voting no, and I hope the rest of you people follow my ways and say no.
Speaker, Vice Chairman Egan, followed by Supervisor Konetsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to see if Dr. Topol has anything to say on this. I've seen him back there and raising his hands and everything else. I would like
You're on the spot.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead, Director Topol.
Thank you. I did try to talk with Mr. Eisen about what would be more flexible. I was not able to in the short time that we had between the time that this came up and it really was a short period of time. And being able to look at another account where there's a sufficient tax levy to reduce that, I didn't want to pick another account. All of my accounts are a blending of tax levy, of federal and state aid, of Medicaid revenue, and of additional dollars that the state gives us at the end of the year. So I couldn't say, oh, take it out of this account versus that one. I don't know what is a better account right now. So he had picked group homes. My concern about group home is simply that we may not have sufficient funding in that account, and I would need to come back and ask for a transfer later. That's fine, or to ask for additional funding. I just wanted to clarify something again, and I want people to understand that surpluses are of various types at the end of the year. You see one big totaled surplus. There's surplus in unexpended labor and fringe when we have people leaving and people coming. We have a couple of months where perhaps we don't have to spend that. That's one account. That's about $500,000. We also have sometimes upwards of $500,000 to $1 million where we actually did our job really well and we kept expenditures down well below where we thought we were going to expend it. That may account for another $500,000 to $1 million. So that's about $1 million to $1.5 million. The other monies that you see in those years were monies that we did not have any idea what those amounts would end up being. We didn't know that they were going to get them. They gave it to us and said, sorry, we can't tell you where it's coming from. And they also said, you should be grateful that you're getting those resources, which I am. I am very grateful to that because every year those monies go back and help fund the entire process of the county. So I guess I take issue with I'm not certain of the word overinflating or bloated or something to that regard, because I know exactly where the surpluses are coming from, and I believe that in all those pieces that it's because we're doing a really good job.
Thank you, Director Topol, and thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. Next speaker is Supervisor Konecki, followed by Supervisor Warnke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to call upon Dr. Topol.
Thank you, Supervisor Konecki. Next speaker, Supervisor Warnke, followed by Supervisor Wingren.
I think that we have beat this thing to death. We have a good supervisor or director of human services, and we need to trust him. If there's money left over, he turns it back in. That's the rule. So I am therefore calling the question.
Okay, there's a motion to call the previous question. Is there a second? Second. There's a motion and a second. That is not debatable. All right, so we will go to a vote of calling the question to essentially officially end debate on this amendment. Okay, that requires a 2/3 vote, so we're going to do a roll call vote. Vote. Yes, clarification, please go ahead.
Are we going to proceed ahead or?
This is solely to end debate. If this motion is approved, then we'll actually vote on the amendment. If it's not, we will continue debate. All right, so vote aye if you want to call the question and end debate, and then go to a vote. Vote no if you do not. That requires a 2/3 vote, and I believe it's members present. Am I correct on that? But this is,
One set of rules for one part of what you're doing, and another set of rules contrary to what you're doing.
it's a fair question, but this is not a main motion. It's simply a subsidiary motion. So the rules on calling the question don't change no matter what debate you're in. Okay? So it passes nonetheless easily, 27-2, to call the question on this. It required a 2/3 majority for passage. That's clearly 2/3 majority. So we have called the question, which means we basically go to a direct vote now on the amendment, and we'll do a roll call vote on it. And vote aye if you want to approve reducing the human resources budget by the $220,000, specifically in the group home account. Vote no if you don't. This will require a majority to pass it, majority obviously to defeat it. So we are now officially on the amendment, amendment number 5, which is to reduce the human services 2020 budget by $200,000 in the group home account. You're going to vote aye if you want to approve the reduction, vote no if you do not want to approve the reduction. And that motion fails 11-18. So we're now on to the next, okay, so we will correct that, so the vote is actually 10-19. So Supervisor Wingren voted no. All right? So that was amendment number 5, so we're on amendment number 6, so we basically have 2 amendments yet to go. So amendment number 6, reduce the Human Services 2020 budget by $20,000, specifically in the Child Residential Care Center account. I will call on Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for resolution number 233-10-2019, amendment number 6.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve amendment number 6. Discussion. Any discussion? I'll call on Supervisor Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm on human service. Maybe that's why I'm a little, I can't even think of the words, but by being on human service, I've been able to see some stuff and hear some stuff where the people need help. And that's the bottom line. They need help. What would you feel and how would you feel if your kid was in desperate needs and we said, nah, we're not going to do it? Because my kid is just strictly healthy. I don't need to. Anyway, I don't mean to be sarcastic, but I think when it comes down for the county and the county board to take care of the citizens of Winnebago County, that's what we were elected to do. Now, we spend money in a lot of other places, but when it comes down to taking care of our own people, there should be no discussion. So I am hoping everybody votes no.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. Next speaker is Supervisor Eisen.
I call a question with a recorded vote.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. So he is voting to call the question. So once again, that is not debatable. So we will go.
Need a second.
Oh yeah, very good point. Was there I believe, yeah, there was a second. So there's a motion and a second, so that takes precedent. It's not debatable, so we'll go directly to a recorded vote to specifically call the question. Vote aye if you want to call the question and end debate. Vote no if you don't. It will require 2/3. Just on the question. This is just on the motion to call the question. Okay. Well, and just to clarify, he called the question, but he was the last speaker. If there's not anyone who wants to speak, we can go to the main vote, and he can withdraw his motion. So if there's no one here to speak, is everyone done with debate? Are you okay with that, Supervisor Eisen? Because there's no one. Very good. So we are going to do a recorded vote on the amendment, though, okay? So it's not calling a question. It is voting on the amendment to reduce the Human Services Budget 2020 by 20,000 votes in the Child Residential Care Center account. Vote aye if you approve the reduction, vote no if you don't. Supervisor Fari? And that motion fails 10 to 20. So we are on the final resolution then. And that's amendment number 7. Reduce the Human Services 2020 budget by $20,000 in the professional services account. I'll once again call on Supervisor Eisen.
I move for approval of amendment number 7.
There's a motion. Is there a second? There's a motion and a second. Any discussion on Amendment 7? Seeing Supervisor Eisen, please go ahead.
Call for a recorded vote.
We'll do a recorded vote. Okay, seeing no other discussion, we'll go directly to a vote on Amendment 7 to reduce the Human Resources 2020 budget by $20,000, specifically in the professional services account. Vote aye if you approve, vote no if you don't. Supervisor Eisen? And that motion fails 10 to 20. So that concludes our amendments for the budget. I'm going to call on the finance director.
I just wanted to update everyone that now we will be applying $2,093,702 of the undesignated general fund balance in our budget now that we had those amendments.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions before we go to a final vote of the budget as amended? Please, Supervisor Nussbaum.
That would take that number to what?
We were going to apply $1,705,000. Now with the diversion program amendment of $282,679, reach counseling grant of $40,000, and the airport director. Actually, we need to take out the airport director. That's going to come out of the airport fund now that I put that in there. So it'll be $2,027,679 from general fund, and then the airport will come out of the airport fund. You bet. For out of the general fund applied will be $2,027,679. The other portion for the airport comes out of their actual fund balance.
So what is the total fund balance?
Our total fund balance, well, right now, it's around 25 million. It's up and down to see where our surplus ends up. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Nussbaum. Thank you, Finance Director. Any other questions before we go to a final vote? Okay, we'll go to a final recorded vote to the budget as amended. Okay? So vote aye if you approve the budget as amended, vote no if you do not. Requires a simple majority. And that motion carries 30-0, so we officially have an adopted, unanimously approved budget. I just want to say thank you to you all for all your efforts with the budget. I want to say certainly thank you to the executive, county executive, to the finance director and all the staff, and certainly the clerk's office for all their help in coordinating the budget process. So with that, if there's nothing else, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. I'll call on Supervisor Albrecht.
I move that we adjourn until November 19th at 6 p.m.
There's a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.